Welcome, everyone. It's really good that you've joined us today. Makes me really happy. My name is Jay Van Groningen, and I'm on the board of Great Lakes Urban. Today, we're going to hear some stories that show the power of community connecting. We apply habits of asset-based community development as sort of the pathway to strengthen both people and neighborhoods. Today, we're going to share stories that show the power of connecting in the southeast side of Grand Rapids. Among other neighborhoods, like in Holland, Michigan, 5 neighborhoods, Godfrey Lee in Wyoming, Great Lakes Urban is currently supporting the work of Bates Place in southeast Grand Rapids neighborhoods. Wayne Squires is the director of Bates Place and has been training and coaching connectors in this work for close to 15 years. I'm so excited you get to hear from his stories today, and with him from Tecca and Luke, 2 connectors also in southeast Grand Rapids. So without further ado, the moderator of today's sessions is Eric Smith, who is Great Lakes Urban's executive director. He's also a veteran community development trainer and coach with experience in Uganda, Springfield, Ohio, Appalachia, and beyond. Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you to moderate the discussion.
Great. Thanks so much, Jay. Thank you for that introduction. And thank you so much to Wayne and Tecca and Luke for being here with us. We truly are excited, and I'm excited to learn from you all today. Really looking forward to this discussion. So I'll make a couple of logistical comments, and then we'll get started. The first thing I would say is this. We do want this to be a conversation. It's a discussion. I think that's how you'll get the most out of this. And it'll feel more like that if you were to go on your screen to the top right corner. You'll see something that says view. And if you aren't already there, click on that view and click on gallery. That way you can see all the speakers at the same time, all the panelists, and I think that'll help your experience. The second thing I would note is that we will have the last 15-20 minutes is reserved for questions that you may have as participant here. Feel free to drop those in the chat as we go along, and we'll get those answered as we can. Finally, I want to point out that you may hear the word or the term asset-based community development. Sometimes we shorten that to ABCD, asset-based community development. And what that is that describes a set of principles and practices and habits that build strong and vibrant neighborhoods. And it does that through a particular lens that's an asset-based or gift-based lens. And that it's done through a relationally driven approach. And it's very much an inside-out, bottom-up grassroots engagement initiative. And so with that, we'll go ahead and get started with our discussions and stories today. Maybe we'll do first some introductions. So maybe Wayne and then Tecca and then Luke, if you could introduce yourselves and your connection to the Baxter neighborhood and the neighborhoods of Grand Rapids that you serve.
Thanks, Eric. You can tell by the color of my hair that I've been around a while. So just a little bit of my background. I have 10 years of experience in the corporate business world and a dozen years of experience in pastoral ministry. And now, Jay said 15 years, it's actually 16 years now of coaching and training in community development work. So, wow, it's been quite a trip, and I'm so thankful. But over 4 years ago, Bates Place Neighbors, which was then called Bates Place Ministries, was going through a significant leadership transition, and the board was just taking another look at what are we here for, how are we doing. It had been years of good engagement that was really focused on community service. So there were aspects of a kind of a drop-in community center, and then trying to come alongside of others to provide good help and support. So there was a desire to serve those in the community. Yet there was a recognition that everything hadn't gone maybe as planned or as hoped for, that there might be a new way forward. And I just happened to be in relationship with folks there at Bates Place, and the board, through some conversation and training, supported a shift to a neighbor-centered approach to engaging the community. And much to my surprise and their surprise, in the fall of 2017, I said yes to coming on as a part-time director. I was in for an organization that was ready to make this kind of shift, and was very excited about it. So I was up for putting those 15 to 20 hours in, and there was right off the bat some capacity to put together a connecting team. And here we are more than 4 years later. So it's been fun.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wayne. Tecca, do you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I am a community connector for the Baxter area. I started out my career as an accountant, and I did tax preparation, which really didn't fulfill me. And I went on an adventure and decided I was going to fight for social justice. Every opportunity to help and to serve, I took. I was a rep for UAW, in which I helped start the first child care union in the state of Michigan. I also helped negotiate that contract in fairness to home-based childcare. After that, I decided, okay, I'm going to do the Michigan Organizing Project. At that time, we were going through immigration reform. So I was fighting for that issue. I've also done some work with Acorn, and in that we were fighting foreclosures, predatory lending that was taking place. And no matter what I tried to do, everything just seemed to come back to grassroots organizing. And then this opportunity came up, and of course I knew this was what I wanted to do. This is what fulfills me, and this is what gives me passion. And the first time I applied for this job, I didn't get it, but that never stopped me from keeping it on my radar and making sure when the opportunity came up again that I would be right there. And so this is my first year going into my second year in the Baxter area. And I can just say that I'm happy to be of service.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I know Wayne speaks so highly of you all, and I know that you're a real, true asset and a gift to the neighborhood and Bates Place. Luke?
Yeah, I was kind of born and raised in West Michigan in a very conservative bubble. And then I got a teaching degree and had a chance to work cross-culturally through a mission organization in West Africa for several years. Kind of cut my teeth on cross-cultural engagement there. Came back to West Michigan after several years and just to get the lay of the land, kind of settled down in Southeast GR and had a kind of, it wasn't a traumatic experience, but a troubling experience in the neighborhood one afternoon that kind of burst my white privileged bubble. And I kind of had this moment of, do I dig in and kind of figure out what's going on and what I can do to work to, better this neighborhood, or do I move out to the suburbs and, do whatever else, do something else. And I just had this sense that I wanted to really invest in the neighborhood I lived in and learn as much as I could about my neighbors and just kind of figure out, kind of unlearn my white privilege and learn what was going on in the neighborhood and get to know my neighbors. So that was yeah, that was almost 5 years ago now. And the first time I applied for a connecting job, I also didn't get it. So Tecca and I have that in common. And now we're fortunate to have a small team that we get to work together with one other gentleman in the Baxter neighborhood. And then we also have the team that Wayne referenced in the South Hills under the Bates Place umbrella. So it's small, but we got a lot of energy, and we're excited to be doing the work in both neighborhoods. And it's challenging, but it's very fulfilling, and it's worth it. So.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. And you have deep respect, my deep respect for your commitment through that. So folks have been hearing the term connecting already a lot. And so Wayne, I don't know if you'd be willing to jump in here and talk about what is connecting work, what is grassroots engagement, what does that look like for Bates Place?
Yeah, so along with me, we have a 3-member connecting team. All of us are working 8 to 15 hours. So as that might imply, we are also doing other stuff to make a go of it. And yet we love this kind of hands-on engagement so much that it's just, we feel like it's worth giving ourselves to this work as a team. So on our side of Eastern, which is in the Bates Place, South Hills area, for us, that means just lots of walking and talking, if you will. We pretty consistently, regardless of weather and conditions, unless it's crazy, we make it a point to walk the neighborhood every week. We have lots of front porch conversations. We do some hanging out in the neighborhood, whether it's at Pleasant Park in pleasant weather, or hanging out in other areas where people live or are gathered. So, for example, Annika, who is one of our connectors, has devoted a Tuesday afternoon every month to just hanging out in the Steeple View apartments. And she is getting to know the residents there and interacting with them. And so we do a lot of walking and talking, but we also have these times of just hanging out and getting to know folks. We support neighbors who are looking to do good things. So right now in the Bates Place area, there's a family who last year, because their 12-year-old son was passionate about doing some kind of event that included luminaries for Christmas Eve, that became a huge thing. And we knew the family, and so we supported that, and they're after it again this year with some different nuances to that. And so that, we're supporting that. I know we're Tecca and Luke. So you need to know that Luke kind of is on both sides of Eastern here. He's on our Bates Place team, but he's heading up the team in the Baxter area too. So in the Baxter neighborhood, there's a neighbor who is really committed to making Christmas a festive time. And so there's this Christmas lights project, and Tecca and Luke and Mark over in Baxter, Tecca and Luke and Mike over in Baxter are supporting that effort right now. So we do that kinds of things. We try to meet together at least twice a month as a team. And so this work really calls for team encouragement and catching up and making sure we're working together. And so that's a part of it. We communicate each week about what our schedules are like so that we pair up at least for the walking in the neighborhood. And so that's kind of what we're up to. I'm reading my notes here, Eric. We do occasionally meet with other connectors. So we meet with the team, the Baxter team. We try to do that. We're trying to do that more consistently. ICCF and these new projects in the neighborhood have what they call connectors in their buildings and their areas, and we're trying to loop them into this connecting work, even though they have a little bit different twist to it. So we're trying to develop some solidarity and encouragement around what we're doing. what we found early on is that this is so important to sustaining the work. It seems like I'm missing something here, but that kind of gives you a sense. We meet with community leaders and try to build trust with them as we have opportunities. But you can tell we're 4 years in and we're still doing a lot of what we call pound the pavement kind of thing.
Yeah, and you shared within that, right? You shared a couple of fascinating stories, right? So neighbors stepping up to do events, and I wonder, Tecca, if you have a favorite story as well, or a interaction or a change that's happened. Do you have a favorite story, a favorite experience from your time?
The Joe Taylor Park is in the Baxter neighborhood area. Joe Taylor Park has pretty much been deemed a no-go. A lot of violence has taken place there to the point where neighbors have said, oh, we won't go there. So this summer, I was granted an opportunity to spend my connecting time in Joe Taylor Park, in which we brought families out. I brought my grandchildren out, and every week we were out there letting the neighbors know this is a place where you can come. This is your park. And so we gathered support. Neighbors started coming out. We had some chess playing going on out there. Neighbors were playing cards. We also provided, I think, maybe 2 to 3 cookouts there, just to give the neighbors a sense of ownership. This is still your park. And I believe the more that the neighbors come out and utilize that park, the less dangerous it'll become.
Yeah, that's great. And I know that the research is bears that out, right? If you've got money to invest in relationships, and crime goes down. I've experienced that in neighborhoods I've served as well. Luke, how about you? Do you have a favorite story or stories, encounters, experiences that you'd like to share?
Yeah, one really short one is, so as Wayne said, we're out walking a lot. It's our primary initiative is just to be meeting neighbors and chatting. And so sometimes we walk the neighborhood and just chat with people who are out walking their dog or raking their leaves. And sometimes we're more intentional and we'll like assign ourselves a block to try and cover in an effort to really seek out connections with folks on that particular block. And I remember one time I was walking on one of our blocks, and I was talking to someone through a screen door, and this person was clearly like an adolescent. So I gave them a safe distance. I didn't want to be anybody who was going to be making them uncomfortable. And then a parent walked up, and she was immediately like on edge because there's a strange person on her front porch talking to someone in her house. And so again, I whenever I'm walking, I try and make sure that none of my body language is aggressive. It's always giving them people space, giving neighbors a respectful distance. Even before COVID was an issue, that was kind of my MO as we go out and walk. And she walked up and said, "We don't want any." And I said, "You don't want any what?" And she said, "Whatever you got, we don't want any." I said, "Well, I don't have anything for you." So that's a win-win situation right there. She said, "Well, what are you doing?" And I said, we're out in the neighborhood getting to know neighbors. I work with Bates Place, and one of the things we do is we just like to connect with folks and chat. And there was like a switch flipped in her brain. Immediately, she was the most agreeable and just so easy to chat with and interested in our work and all that. And so oftentimes as we're out walking, people, they make a lot of assumptions about who we are and what we're doing, door-to-door salespeople, or trying to convert them to something or what have you. And the beauty of this work is it's so relational. And so we're not there with hidden agendas or trying to sell anything. We're just there to get to know folks. And once we get that preliminary kind of trust to start to build up, it's just the relationships and the conversations become a lot easier and a lot more meaningful and fulfilling. And so, yeah, that's a short, sweet conversation that I really enjoyed.
That's great. And you're sharing really kind of tips of the trade, right? That anybody could use, being mindful of body language and those kinds of things in those situations and being careful about that, mindful of it. It also, yes.
I should just mention one thing that we're doing in Baxter and Bates Place. Like, we do lots of simple hospitality kinds of things.
Right.
Whether it's even in our teamwork, being hospitable to one another in the ways that we meet and interact. But we, everything from, Saturday brunches to marshmallow roast to block barbecues or whatever. We work with neighbors to create environments where, that usually include food and the kind of conversation that makes people feel comfortable, but also starts to create layers of trust in the relationship. And so we just have done that a lot. Of course, when COVID hit, that kind of, especially for the first 6 months or so, diffused that. The amount that we did that. We've come back and are being careful and done as much outside as we can, but simple hospitality has been a big part of being present in our area.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Maybe our viewers may not see this. Maybe you've experienced a greater sense of belonging and so forth when you grew up, and what difference that makes. But there's a growing mountain of evidence that being connected to neighbors breaks down the sense of isolation, the sense of aloneness, and that in and of itself produces better life outcomes, better health, better longevity. So I applaud you for those relationships, the fellowshipping, the connections. It has a ripple effect across the neighborhood and in people's lives.
And to pick up on that just real quick is that is such a major thing, is that in and of itself, it is valuable, it is worthwhile. Again, many of us are in situations where when we think of outputs and outcomes, we see this as what we're talking about as a stepping stone to something better or greater or whatever. And I would just say we are committed to valuing these encounters and this relationship building as much as anything else.
Yeah, thank you. And it'd be interesting too so my experience has been too, right? Those encounters, supporting that neighbor who wants to do that event, right? That Christmas event, the luminaries and so forth. When you get a lot of those encounters that lead to those kinds of activity, then you start to build what in the business, at least, we refer to as collective self-efficacy, right? The confidence that we can achieve more. You start to see parks being reclaimed, right, Tecca? Because people are now saying, this is our park, this is our part of our treasure right here in this space, and we, this is ours, and we can do something about it. So, have you seen that play out? I don't know, maybe from Tecca's story or someone else. That collective self-efficacy, those conversations leading to action that makes a difference.
I think the luminary, going back to that idea, that one is a good example of that, because here's a young man who has an idea. He's 11, 12 years old, and so I have experience in education, and I think I gravitate towards conversations with younger folks better than I do with adults oftentimes. And so in conversation with him, we were able to kind of amplify his voice. And so we facilitated a meeting on his behalf, and his parents were there, and some other neighbors were there, kind of a strategic meeting for planning this luminary thing. And instead of like defaulting to asking his parents the questions, we were propping him up and propping his voice up. And I could, as we did this, I could kind of see him realizing that he was an equal stakeholder in this planning, and it was going to be up to him to kind of make it happen and to empower folks. We empowered him from behind, and then he had that platform then to go to the neighborhood. And he's already a very energetic, and he would have probably succeeded without our help, but we were able to amplify his voice a bit and able to walk him through some logistical stuff, because we have experience as a team in doing some hospitality stuff and the planning of an event. And so he was, through that process, he and his parents and some other neighbors, it was kind of cool to see that kind of light flip on, that they had the ability to make this happen. And that's, I think, why it's happening again this year. And could, I mean, in theory, become a regular thing for this block and this neighborhood.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I don't know about you. I know from my past when I've been a connector, that it's been some of the most fulfilling work I've ever had happen. It's very rewarding in many ways, and there's lots of points of joy and celebration. And I don't know if that's been your experience. I don't know if there have been points in this that have given you particular joy in the work. Maybe Wayne, you could start us off, and Tecca and Luke.
Gosh, I go back, one of the most joyful memories is in the first year we were pulling the team together and doing this work, we through some interviews with community leaders, were able to meet Kim over at Allen Manor, the manager there. It's a senior resident living facility in the neighborhood. And she'd had bad experience with others who had good intentions for their residents, you know. And through a series of conversations, we were able to build trust with her. And then we were able to get to know some of the residents because she trusted us, and we were able to come in and get to know them. And we started capturing some oral histories of the folks living there. And we found out that many of these folks, many of the residents had grown up in the South and were part of sharecropping families and had amazing stories to tell about their lives. But this passion for gardening was sustained in their lives. They talked about how wonderful it was to grow stuff and to provide food for their families, even in tough situations. And out of that came this idea, well, are you guys still interested in gardening for those that were able? And Kim supported the effort. And pretty soon we were, with volunteers and neighbors, we were building 10 raised bed gardens and creating kind of a garden club with the residents there. And I could go into all kinds of details about what that meant. But it's led to 3 sites now where we have community gardening going on. And when the pandemic hit, we were able to help work with neighbors to build beds on their own properties. And so the joy of seeing how one interview with the community leader led to trust, led to relationship, led to amazing stories, led to shared passion, led to the multiplication of something that continues to be life-giving, just brings great joy.
That's wonderful. What a great story. Thank you, Wayne. It reminds me of the fact that there's treasure everywhere, right? In these neighborhoods. It begins by listening, right? Is what I'm learning from you. Listening and looking for that treasure, in this case, history and culture, you know. Tecca, how about you?
Yes, the same neighbor that, and I will call her name Pat, the same neighbor that wants to do the festive lights for the holiday season also had inspiration to do a chili cook on the southeast side. And we were fortunate enough to support her in that. Watching the neighbors come out was key, but we also had police officers that stopped by for lunch, and they went and told other officers, and they too came. And to see the neighbors and the officers together without purpose other than to share a meal was so gratifying to me. I just lit a spark. And so that makes me feel like the engagement is working. The engagement between the neighbors, between the community is working.
Yeah, what a great, wonderful story. Luke, anything from you? A particular point of joy, or?
Well, they're stealing all the good ones. I think the proliferation of gardens in the neighborhood, just to kind of piggyback on Wayne's, we started with 10 garden beds that first summer, and we've built a minimum of 10 or 12 gardens with neighbors every spring since, to the point where there's upwards of 50 garden beds spread out throughout the neighborhood between the South Hills and the Baxter neighborhood. And we're responsible for the vast majority of those where they are, and have the support of a couple other institutions. And I think just to see that kind of proliferation has been really exciting, because the seeds of that project were amazing. I get misty thinking about the history of these folks who, like Wayne said, grew up in the Deep South under much more challenging circumstances, and now are returning to their roots in a literal sense. And just to watch that kind of spread out throughout the neighborhood. And I think another thing is empowering neighbors to just have access to good produce. And we've gotten to the point where we've been fortunate to convert some of our own property at Bates Place into a community sharing garden that the community just kind of is what we're working on, the community taking ownership of. So we have just a simple array of tomatoes and peppers, and we got some blueberry plants, and we had a cutting garden. So for flowers, one of the things that people they're not going to spend money on themselves on cut flowers, but flowers are not hard to grow. And so through the course of more conversations, we thought, what's a way that neighbors could really treat themselves and brighten up their days? And through some of those conversations, it came to pass that we were going to grow a cutting garden for cut flowers. And it's just a really simple thing, but we would go and cut bouquets and leave them in a little box, and people could just come and grab them and bring them home, or they could cut their own flowers. It was just a little bright spot in the neighborhood that neighbors could come and enjoy. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. Adding health and beauty, and also agency at the same time. What a great story. Really appreciate that. Maybe Luke, we'll stick with you for a second. The other thing I'd recognized when I've been a connector is, you've already alluded to this, but there's often a surprise, right? What people are able to do, or whatever it is. But what would you say is a surprise or a learning that you've had in this work?
Oh man, surprise. I'm trying to think of. Are you asking what has surprised me the most in the work? Am I understanding that right?
Sure.
Or
what's yep.
I think what surprises me is, it shouldn't surprise me, but we spend hours and hours in the neighborhood. And what surprises me is how many people recognize me now. It's just become, I'm an introvert, so left to my own devices, I would just walk quietly down the road. But this job demands more from me, and that's grown me a lot to become what seems like a natural conversationalist, when that might not have been the way I was wired originally. So just to walk down the street and have people honk their horns or holler. One guy on a block calls me breakfast man, because we did some hospitality events around brunches for neighbors, and it was kind of like a brunch potluck, and I apparently brought really memorable breakfast foods. And so that's just like on that block, that's what they holler when I walk by. So I think being known in the neighborhood is really exciting, surprising, and empowering for the nature of the work.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and perhaps has added to your life as well, those relationships. And
yeah, absolutely.
We're made to be in relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tecca, anything else you would add? Something that's been surprising to you, or something you've learned, a key lesson along the way that you want to share?
Yes. As a grassroots organizer, I was always able to tell neighbors what they could do, what this thing they could do could help change things. As a connector, I ask questions and let them tell me what they want to see within their community. And it sparks imagination, and that in turn gives them the opportunity to set goals, and even to sit back and reminisce and think about what things could be. And so it's a flip of the coin for me. And it's very fulfilling to know that we're able to empower our neighbors by just simply listening and supporting.
I often tell people that the most powerful tool in their toolkit is the question, right? having that next best question to help people imagine differently, right? Wayne, anything you'd want to add? And then maybe you could also then move into sharing about, thinking about deepening and sustaining this work, right, in Grand Rapids, and maybe could cast some vision around that. But any lesson or learning along the way, and then you could answer that second question as well.
Well, I've been surprised. I was surprised that I was surprised, because I'm a team guy. Like all through the corporate business journey or pastoral ministry or other things I've done in life, I've always been pretty committed to team dynamics and healthiness and working as a team. Just the importance of team in this work is like amplified based on my own experience. Like, there's no way to do this as an individual superstar, or or to try to pull this off alone. And so the importance of team and spending time as a team to make sure that we're engaging together and meaningfully certainly is something that's a takeaway for me in the work. And the other thing that surprised me, particularly in the work in the South Hills area and even on the other side in the Baxter area, is the role of senior citizens in neighborhood life, their value, their importance, their catalytic role. I've been so surprised. The deepest, most meaningful interactions have been with those who are in their retirement years, who have a memory of life in the neighborhood in some ways when it was better, and they know what could be, and they bring a kind of groundedness and stability that's so important in neighborhood relationships. And they're the ones most interested in coming alongside of us. So I just like when that surprised the heck out of me. Because we tend to think, where are the young people and where's the energy? And of course, that is really important, because concern for youth has certainly entered the picture, and how young people get involved in this work. But I've been really blown away by the role that senior citizens play and the depth of relationships that we have with them so far on this journey. In terms of thinking ahead, we just came off a board staff retreat at Bates Place, so I'm going to grab some results of the work that we did, just to let you know kind of what we're hoping for the next year, especially, and it's just really around kind of the nuts and bolts of this work of ABCD. So the first thing we're hoping for is that our listening activities will be deepened and broadened. So we want to do a better job of capturing feedback from neighbors and then following up with it. So we're good at walking and having conversations, and even entering in some walking notes. We have a Google document, we put in walking notes, but we haven't always been diligent in doing the follow-up or taking advantage of follow-up opportunities. So that's one thing we want to do. We want to even deepen our the sharing of oral histories and family stories in the neighborhood. That's just produced so much fruit, and people are often willing to share those stories, not only with us, but with others. And we're trying to create settings and forums where that can take place and deepen this level of solidarity of the neighborhood. And we certainly want to take advantage of the training opportunities that we have more broadly. So we get requests for people to say, hey, could you come introduce us to an asset-based approach to communities, and can you introduce us to connecting strategies? And so we continue to do that as we can. And we've had a couple of entities in other parts of the city come and say, can you help us with doing good listening in our areas? We want to take next steps, and we realize we haven't done the greatest job of identifying what's actually happening in our neighborhoods and where people care about stuff. And so we're actually looking to support that. Of course, our main focus is deepening the work right where we are, but we do want to take advantage of opportunities to broaden and multiply this listening and response approach to communities. So that's number one. We want to improve at listening. We want to more consistently organize residents around areas of common interest. We've got some things happening around gardening. We want to see some teams form around our gardening sites. We think, based on our conversations and interactions, we have opportunities to help teams form around things like hospitality and safety and beautification and cleanup, and perhaps working with youth in certain ways in the area. We think that over the next year, we've got enough kind of like social capital in the bank, so to speak, that we can now start to pull together things that we've heard and where people are expressing interest and see some action teams formed. And so we're really excited about that. We want to be a part of developing more local neighborhood leaders. And so again, we think we have an opportunity to identify and support block level connectors. So people that clearly care about their section of the neighborhood. We think that we can help take that along a little further, and people will take on that kind of leadership mantle for the block, if you will, or for their area of the city. We're also looking to pull together a neighborhood advisory team. 7 or 8 folks that clearly are passionate about life in the neighborhood. We want this to be a team that's diverse and works with us and helps give us even more feedback than what we've been getting. And they have the ownership too with us to move it forward. From a Bates Place perspective, this will help us make even a more significant shift to more representative leadership on the board. It'll be a bigger board and a more representative board that supports the work. And so we're excited about that. We want to, another thing we want to do is get more clear and consistent on assessing progress. So again, we're good at engaging and kind of catching up and moving some things forward, but we're not always great at stepping back and asking, how are we really doing? And asking that with the neighbors that we're engaging with. We're seeing this happen. How can we move this forward? So we want to do that more consistently, and certainly as a staff team, we want to do that minimally on a quarterly basis to really assess how things are going. And then we want to increase our staff support for what we call assessment and response work. So we have a person on staff who, Mark, does a really great job of being present at certain hours in the week. And we have neighbors who make appointments and are facing a family or life challenge or a situation, and they're looking for ways to navigate that. And Mark will listen and work with them to find needed resources and to help them take the next steps. And he does a really great job with that. But what's emerging now is we want to support that more and integrate it even more carefully with the connecting side of things. So that means building capacity around coaching and walking with others. And so that's something we want to grow in. So I know that's a lot there, but we feel like we're kind of on this precipice. That's not the right word. That this next year is really significant of 4 years of being present, of relationship building, and valuable in and of itself. But we think in terms of action and making things better, we'll see much greater progress.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Wayne. And that's an exciting vision, right? That we can live, that you're living into, and that we, hopefully people can rally behind. I could sit here all day and ask those questions, but I want to make sure we reserve some time for Q&A from our audience. So if you haven't had a chance to yet, we do have some questions that come in, but do feel free to drop that in. And while you're typing into the chat your questions, I just want to say a few words. Hopefully your heart's been tugged through this process to hear about residents stepping up and reclaiming a park, and residents working on events, connecting events like the December holiday events. But hopefully these things are resonating with you. And so I don't know about you, but sometimes I come away with these from these events, from these virtual events, and I'm wondering what can I take from that, right? So I want to share 3 things that you could do if you want to take a next step with us. One of those things is just be a good neighbor where you are. And if you're looking for resources, we have a good neighbor tab on our website, which is greatlakеsurban.com or .org. And there's a tab that says Good Neighbor. It just has some very simple kinds of activities you could do to be a good neighbor right where you are. And that helps to be a part of this movement that's creating connection and building change across the country. Second possible thing you could do is become a financial supporter of the work. Maybe you want to support other people to be good neighbors. And you can see these links in your chat. You know, if you're like me, you just feel like, boy, Bates Place has already made a huge difference building that relational fabric, and they're just on that cusp of making some really deep, innovative change happen in Grand Rapids. Maybe that attracts you. We dropped in the Bates Place link to the Bates Place website, where you can go and make a PayPal secure online donation, or of course send in a check. I want you to know that we are in conversation, Great Lakes Urban and Bates Place, and how do we deepen our partnership and our support of Bates Place. You can also give to our Giving Tuesday and end of year campaign. With deep gratitude in my heart, I will mention that we have some very generous supporters who will match your contribution. So you can double your impact by giving between now and January or December 31st. So know that, and that link to that campaign is in our chat. And then the last thing I would say is stay connected to the work. Hear from us, the updates and so forth. And you can do that again by going to our website. The Get Connected tab will take you to where you can friend our Facebook page, and or you can sign up for our newsletter. And that'll be one way for us to stay connected and for you to get these same kinds of inspirations and stories from us. So a few words about 3 things that you could do today to continue this journey with us. But with that, I do want to turn to some questions that have come in. And one was a very practical one. What do you do with excess produce? So we talked about those gardens that have been coming up, and what do you do with the excess produce?
The excess produce, we have a kind of a crate that sits on the edge of the garden. We're working on the signage, so we want to make it very clear that the community garden is for the neighbors, so they have that ownership of it and continue to take ownership of it. And then there's a little black, it's like one of those crates that greenhouses have, and I made a little sign that I wired to the corner that says "Help yourself." And if there's extra stuff, we put it in there, and it disappears pretty quick. So fresh herbs, veggies, like I said, little bouquets of flowers, they all go in the crate. And then there's a lot of foot traffic on our block, and so we got people walking by pretty much hourly. And so the produce it almost always finds a good home. And we also have some cooks on our team, so if worse comes to worse, we'll avail ourselves as well of the produce.
And the handful of times where we didn't want to see the produce sitting around much longer, it's a way to go, with those in proximity to carry some tomatoes and peppers and eggplant and such around to say, hey, are you interested? And a lot of times people are, and it deepens the relationship. So
there's a follow-up garden question that's asked, have you applied for specific economic or expertise support to make the gardening project better? Is there an opportunity to come and learn about the way you follow up with volunteers?
We we actually have one of our connectors on our team has grown up in the greenhouse business, so we have some built-in expertise there. We have applied for grants from the city of Grand Rapids. That was part of what helped us get that off the ground initially, with a neighborhood match grant. Wayne can correct me if I'm wrong there. So we were able to avail ourselves of those resources. We have also, we have done, I wouldn't call them like, not academically speaking classes, but we have had sort of open houses where we've advertised and brought in experts in composting, in growing vegetables and that sort of thing, and then advertise that to the neighborhood so that neighbors can come in and remove barriers that might be intimidating them from doing their own gardening, and trying to make it as approachable and easy as possible.
Yeah, that's great. I have found personally that something about agriculture, when you have sovereignty over your own food, then that leads to feeling that, hey, there is sovereignty around our neighborhood, right? We can be the ones that make the change for our neighborhood. It's a great launching pad for a lot of great things. There are some other questions here. And one of those says this: if you're a connector working through a church, the church often also feels a need to connect. What have you learned about incorporating the listening you do as connectors into impacting the church's ownership and strategizing?
This is a fun question.
Luke, why don't you tackle that?
Yeah, so the Baxter Connectors, our team of 3 is directly supported by Sherman Street CRC. And they had a similar journey to Bates Place, which is in close proximity to First CRC, where they wanted to engage the neighborhood and had tried different strategies with varying degrees of success. And so Wayne had some relationships with folks at the church there as well, and through some coaching, they got wind of this asset-based community development and wanted to form. They didn't have the budget to form a whole team, so they just hired one connector initially. But that, through some work, was able to grow into a team of 3. And it's a balancing act, because as connectors, our priority is relationships with neighbors. And I think having a clear line of communication with leadership at the church and with the congregation at large is important. And so that's something that we at Sherman Street, whenever I'm in front of folks, I go in front of them. It used to be quarterly, and now it's going to be monthly. I'm going to be in front of the church just sharing what we do, just to kind of reinforce that we are there for neighbors. But that doesn't mean that the church is not a stakeholder and an important part of the neighborhood as well. And so that balance looks like us trying to find those opportunities where it's appropriate to bring neighbors together with church folks. And so, like the gardening thing, the classes I referenced, that was a church neighbor combo where we had neighbors who were interested in gardening and church folks who were interested in gardening. This common interest brought them together, and we were able to bring in experts to share their expertise with these folks. So if we're doing our job well, we're constantly looking for those opportunities to bring those groups together in appropriate ways, but also making sure that the terms are clear to the church. We're not errand people for the church within the neighborhood. It's not our prerogative to do their projects in the neighborhood, and that sounds a little harsh, maybe to the folks who are signing our checks. But I think that when they understand that, they realize that our initiative is the neighbors ultimately.
I would just jump in and say the relationship that Bates Place has with First Church, which is right next door, is a great relationship. And yet, as Lucas said, we've had to navigate this. So Bates Place Ministries was birthed from First Church way back like 2005, 2006. It became a 501c3 in 2010. And when we made the shift that we talk about, the church continues to support the work in just very significant ways financially. But we've had to talk through, what does this relationship mean in this, what First calls the parish area, right? And so we've just developed some simple things. I am meeting with the staff once a month at the staff meeting to make sure that we're talking through opportunities and we're not missing opportunities to work together around even simple things. We settled on some joint hosting of hospitality events so that people can be present and, connect around food, and it doesn't feel like somebody's coming in to do a project kind of thing. We've had first folks who care about the parish area come and help us out with like the building garden boxes with neighbors, and have been quite supportive in terms of these or with yes, different projects that we've done. They've been saying our role can be to help with this. The biggest thing we encourage folks from the church to do is to come walk with us if they're really interested in being present consistently, to walk with us, to get to know some of the neighbors, to pray with us, to do some prayer walking with us, to do the kinds of things that raise awareness, their awareness of what life is like in the parish area. The biggest thing we encourage is that they do good neighboring where they are as people of faith. And when that happens, a lot of other things will fall into place.
No, that's great. Thank you for that. There's a few questions left. Jay, you can jump in. I see you had a question about surprise, but we know what surprised you as the assets in the neighborhood and the treasure that exists, the people and the land. I feel like maybe we've covered that to some degree, but feel free to jump in if you have an addition to that. But then we have two more, and so maybe Tecca, you could answer one, and then Luke, you could answer this last one, and then Wayne will give you the last word and we'll wrap up. So Tecca, I want you to, especially with your background, I'd love for you to think through this with us, this question. And where'd that go? Well, let's see. Oh, how do you organize your neighbors to participate in working on issues of common interest?
Talking with your neighbors, listening to your neighbors, and introducing neighbors with common goals to each other in order to support each other's goal, dream, whatever that may be. And it's just through conversation, it's through walking and getting to know everyone. And I credit Wayne Squires because our first meeting was a workshop in where I learned to do asset mapping, which meant I learned in the neighborhood who was the mechanic, who did lawn care, and introduced those to the neighbors that would utilize those services. So it's just about getting out there and speaking with your neighbors, listening to your neighbors, and then making introductions and letting them know, well, there's another neighbor who has a similar interest.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. And Luke, that last question, maybe you could share with us, what's your tip? Somebody asked, how could I get started in my neighborhood if I want to do something like this?
So draw yourself a tic-tac-toe board and make your house the middle box of the tic-tac-toe board, and see of your neighbors how many of those other boxes you can fill in with the neighbors in direct proximity to your house. I'm blatantly stealing an exercise from our training, but it works. It forces perspective. Who do I actually know? Just start with names, and then challenge yourself to engage folks. I had the privilege to take a bunch of Calvin students on a walk through our neighborhood. They were doing their freshman sort of initiation and getting out into the city, and the same question was asked, and it's as simple as being disciplined to get to know your neighbors. And it doesn't have to be a deep conversation right off the bat, but if you take the time to say hi and make small talk, it's those little connections that lay the groundwork for further connections. And it doesn't happen as easily as I think we like to idealize. I think we picture Mayberry and everybody knows everybody, and It's this like idyllic town, and it's just nobody lives in that neighborhood, or at least as far as I haven't met them yet. So it really truly takes effort to get to know folks and say hi to the people walking by. I was sitting with a neighbor actually. He saw me walk by. He's like, "Hey, I'm making coffee. Please come sit on the porch and drink coffee with me." And I didn't have anywhere I had to be, so I thought, sure, I'll sit here and I'll chat with him. And I noticed he said hi to every single person that walked by his front porch, and he knew most of them. And that doesn't just happen. That's something that truly is a discipline to get to know folks. So if you start there, it'll be remarkably quick before you start to uncover some treasures, common interests, hidden talents, and it just gets more exciting from there.
Well, I noticed we've hit 1 o'clock now, and so we're going to wrap this up and close things out. But I just want to share just a sincere, deep appreciation, Wayne, Tecca, and Luke, for your taking time to be with us, and your taking time of your day and of your connecting work. But we just want to encourage you that this has been an encouraging and inspiration to us. And so please just keep on the work. To those that are listening in, again, think about, do you want to financially support? Do you want to think about, do you want to do something in your neighborhood, be a good neighbor, like Luke said, or at least stay connected with us through our newsletter or Facebook. So 3 things you can take. Wayne, in the last 10 seconds, any last words, and then we'll wrap up.
Just the power of relentless incrementalism. Value the small things in this work, and because they do lead to significant things.
Wonderful, thank you. And that was one of the comments in the chat I should have shared, but somebody said ABCD works, and somebody else replied, it sure does. So thank you all. You've been an evidence of that here sharing with us today. Thanks to everybody that attended. Sincere appreciation for you taking time to be with us. And with that, we'll close things out, and good luck with the rest of your day.